Hi, parents. Welcome to Toddler Toolkit Podcast. I am so excited today to welcome Diane Dempster to our show today. We're going to have a great conversation with her. She is the co-founder of impactparents.com, a coaching and training organization for parenting neurodiverse kids, and co-host of the Parenting with Impact podcast. Welcome, Diane. We are so glad to have you here.
Well, and I'm excited to be here with you as well.
That's amazing. So, as everybody gets to know you here on this podcast today, can you tell us a little bit what led you to start Impact Parents and journey along the way to get to where you got?
Yeah, no, the interesting backstory, right? So, back in the day, this all really started when I became a parent, and I was one of those kind of type A, get it done, make it happen humans, and was blessed with a couple of neuro quirky kids. So, when my oldest was in second grade, he started struggling in his school. We got him diagnosed at the time with ADHD. And things just kind of moved forward from there. About the same time, I left my corporate position and decided to go back and become a leadership coach. And in the process, was trying to figure out, well, who do I want to help and what do I want to be doing? I'm starting a new career and those sorts of things. And the International ADHD Conference back in 2010 was in Atlanta, and I had met through my network another coach who was a parent, and we had been talking about, let's get together, let's talk about what we know. My now business partner, Elaine Taylor Klaus, and I met at that conference and started talking about a couple of things. One is our experience as parents, and then number two, our experience going through coach training and what that meant. And a couple of things came out of those conversations. One was that at the time, there were a lot of supports out there focused on kids with ADHD. If we just start with that audience, because that's really where we got our start. There were lots of resources focused on the kids, but very few focused on the parents. And we both had struggled in different ways. I'm more of a type A person. She was an adult with neurodiversity herself. And so she was struggling and feeling really lost about how do I help my kids? Where do I go? That sort of thing. And part of the story is that when we each became coaches, we found that we became much stronger parents, the kinds of parents that our kids really needed. And so, long story short, fast forward, what we do is teach neurodiversity-informed coaching tools to parents, not so that they can become their kids' coach, but because coaching is an empowerment-based modality. It's a change-based modality. It's designed to help behaviors to change. And so we help parents to figure out, how do I move my family forward? How do I make change in my family? How do I help my kids who are struggling move forward and change their behaviors? And as I mentioned, we started supporting parents with kids with ADHD. And what we realized and recognize now is, 70% of kids with ADHD have some other types of issues, whether it's learning differences, autism, anxiety. There's some metabolic challenges, but the umbrella, the language we use now is complex kids. And we say that complex kids are kids who struggle with life, learning, social, emotional issues. And I always say to a parent, it's like, if you have a complex kid, you know it. And so we help those parents to really step in and help their kids understand where they're at and how to help them to change their behaviors over time.
Wow, that's amazing. I love what you said about helping the parents, because there are so many tools and strategies and methods out there to help children, but how does the parent come into that? What are the tools for the parents and their interaction? And like you said, maybe they're neurodivergent, maybe they're not, maybe they have a certain way of doing things, maybe they don't. And that whole combination is something I think is really super interesting.
Can I jump in on that for just a second? Because what comes up as you're saying that is that there's two reasons that's important. One is because if you have a child with ADHD or other challenges of executive function, and I don't know whether you've talked about executive function on your podcast before, but executive function is the part of your brain that helps you to know what to do and what not to do. It controls all our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And so if you have a child with ADHD or anxiety or autism, it impacts their executive function. And so if you have a child with executive function challenges, recommended treatment includes training for parents. And so, and what we've found in the research that we've done over the last, 13, 15 years is to find out that most parents are not getting referred for that recommended treatment. A lot of times their pediatrician, or if their kid's struggling, they'll send them to a great website, a great podcast. I mean, I'm not discounting great websites and great podcasts. We both have them. And that's not actually what recommended treatment is. Recommended treatment is you get some training, you have some support from other parents, you understand kind of what do I need to do differently as a parent to support my child. So that's the first reason that focusing on the parent is important. The other piece of it is that every child is different. Every family is different. You were just mentioning some of the adults that we work with also are neurodivergent. I use the term neuro-spicy sometimes. A lot of our parents are neuro-spicy, just like their kids. And some of the more, I think we'll probably talk about this at some point, some of the more typical methods of parenting don't quite work the same way with these kids. And so there's this opportunity to go, okay, not just what general information is out there, but how do I take that information and make it more practical, make it more realistic, and actually do it? Because I see parents all the time getting stuck on the internet at 2 a.m, out there looking for some magic bullet that's going to fix everything, instead of going, okay, what do I start doing now, and trying to figure out what exactly is it that I need? What exactly is it that my family needs today? Because sorry, if you have a neurospicy kid, the challenges you have today are going to be different than the challenges maybe that tomorrow, but definitely 3 or 5 years from now.
Yeah, and it's kind of like information overload for parents, but the actual like helping the child is when we're actually helping ourselves and implementing something. And I think it's like this paralysis that parents can get into where we're so overloaded with information everywhere. Yes, this podcast is just like a starting point, but there's a next step. So, if you're a parent listening that you feel like your child is struggling with something, you're wondering if they are a complex child or a neurodiverse child. I think a lot of parents, like even in the toddler years and early preschool, maybe kindergarten, they start seeing some signs because there's so much information everywhere. They wonder what their options are, and then they're navigating that. And then they get to elementary school where maybe their teacher is telling them, hey, your child is, struggling in the classroom. These are some of the challenges we're seeing. And is there more that needs to go on? And then we have, like you said, the pediatrician who might be giving kind of some of their advice or perspective. So I think it is really important to realize what steps parents can take to get more information that just isn't information overload, but is going to help them be in the path of least resistance.
Well, I love that question because there's actually two things going on. One is kind of understanding what's going on that gets us into information overload, I think. And then the other is like what to do instead. So the reason I think that we go into information overload as humans is because for most of us, it's either overwhelm or fear. Let's just label it those two things. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I want to help my child. I can't figure this out. I mean, a lot of times it's like, oh, if my child has cut their knee, I know that I need a Band-Aid, or I know that I need to take them to get stitches. It's like this sort of, if we don't know what to do, we get into a reactive cycle. That's part of being human. If we're scared for our kids' futures, and a lot of times that's what will happen. It's like this sort of, oh my gosh, my kid is really struggling to make friends in kindergarten. What's this going to mean? Are they going to be living on their own? Are they never going to be able to have a life partner? I mean, it's like all of these things that we do to worry and catastrophize. And so when we get in that sort of agitated state, our tendency is going to be to fix it, right? It's just sort of, I got to fix this and I got to fix it right now. Because if you think about it, if you're having an emergency in your family, it's like, okay, we literally do need to fix this, right? But if you go back to that parent who's got the toddler who's struggling socially and they're worried that they're never going to have a life partner, I mean, we got some time in here between now and the age 30, when, the average time when people get married, that they can figure out the skills or do the things, or you can get the help. But so when we go into fix it mode, we're like animals to go find the information. And as I said earlier, a lot of us are thinking that there's some magic thing that we can do. And part of this, respectfully, is the way that our medical model works right now is this sort of, I've got a problem, here's the solution. I've got a problem, here's the solution. And if you've got a neurodivergent kid, it's not, it doesn't work that way. Right. It's just sort of this is the way this child's brain is wired. And it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And it's sometimes quirky and sometimes really creative and sometimes struggles. But it's not about fixing your kid's brain. It's about going, how do I help my kid? How do I understand what's going on with my kid's brain well enough to help them understand what's going on with their brain, to help them figure out how do I navigate in a world that really kind of wants us to fit in, or figure out where is it that I do fit in that makes more sense for me and for my family dynamic. Does that make sense?
I love the perspective of understanding who our children are, accepting them for who they are, and playing to their strengths, giving them the skills and the tools they need to be successful, as opposed to trying to change them or mold them to be a certain way that they are not. And that's a huge part of what I believe is a message that needs to be put out there more. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I think I would take it a step further because honestly, when people hear that, okay, so we got to teach them the skills. Okay, great. Tell me what I need to do. I'll teach them the skills tomorrow. We'll be fine. And the reality is with these kids, they're often the research shows that they're often 3 to 5 years behind their peers in terms of some areas of executive function development. Right? Doesn't mean they aren't super smart. A lot of these kids are gifted. A lot of these kids are above age level in terms of their physical development or their mental development. We're talking about their ability to organize and plan and follow instructions and manage their emotions and all those things that help us to be successful either in a school environment or a family environment. These kids are often 3 to 5 years behind their peers. And it's not about, okay, great, you're here, let me catch you up so that you're caught up with everybody. They may be ready to learn a skill, but it may be a few years that they need to have that skill accommodated in order to wait for them to be ready to learn the skill. And those of you who have kids who are school age know that in the school setting, if you have a kid with a diagnosis, ADHD, autism, anxiety, there are accommodations that happen in the school environment. And that's a very common sort of thing that's happening all over. And what I think parents don't pay attention to is, oh, wait, if my kid's got accommodations at school, maybe I need to accommodate them at home as well. Maybe they need help doing the work of being a participant at home just as much as they need help. So they might need reminders. They might need help to stop playing Legos and begin to get to dinner time. They might need, they might need support and help from you in a different way than you would necessarily think. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not listening or they're a bad kid. It's really just that they're having a hard time with doing the things that you're expecting them to do or that they want to be able to do even.
That's so true. Parent expectation, we may not realize, but is kind of faceted in our communication with our children. Like our expectations, it comes out through communication, it comes out through the parent child relationship, and understanding what our expectations are and understanding where our child is and meet them where they are is really important. Level the playing field for them.
Yeah, no, and that we use that phrase, meet them where they are and then raise the bar from there. One of the things I would say that because I work with a lot of parents of teens and young adults as well as younger age kids is a lot of times, and I don't want to put a guilt trip on any parent, so I'm going to start with that. But a lot of what happens is that if we set expectations too high for our kids, and they're trying, I mean, when kids are young, they want to do really what was it? The phrase, it's like kids do well when they can, right? It's just that these kids want to do well. And if our expectations are not realistic for them, they're going to think maybe there's something wrong with me. I want to be able to come to dinner. I want to be able to do the things that mom and dad ask me. I want to be able to do the things that they're asking me to do in school. And if they don't understand that it's not just that they should be trying harder, because like that, how heartbreaking it is it to tell somebody to try harder when it's not about trying harder. if we set expectations that aren't realistic for these kids, chances are they're going to end up in a space of shame. They're going to end up in a space where it's like, I don't care. You can't make me. That's where these kids kind of develop these coping mechanisms because they don't know how to fix the problem any more than we do. I can't tell you, I was saying this before we started interviewing. It's like, I have so many parents of teens and young adults come to me and say, I wish I'd known this 10 years ago. I wish I had understood this in a different way 10 years ago. And again, it's a sort of don't panic. If you are a parent of a younger, older kid, these tools and these understandings can definitely help you now. And if you are a parent of a young kid and they're struggling, get some support and some help now so that you can set the family and these kids up for the future so that they can feel good about themselves as they develop and again embrace their beautiful quirky brains.
Yes, that is so important to have that support. And so after we've talked about kind of like some of the stresses that parents or children are going through personally at home, at school, what are some effective techniques for reducing stress for families, children, teens, or young adults who have these complex needs?
Well, I think that the first thing about stress is just paying attention to it, right? Recognizing that it's there. A lot of times our kids are stressed and we don't even realize it. I have parents all the time who say, my kid has one of those tempers where they just go from 0 to 100 like that. And I'm pretty convinced that most of those kids are actually, I'm going to use the word masking, which has a particular terminology in some settings, but are masking their stress and are actually walking around at a 5 or a 6 most of the days. And so if they're getting up to a 10 that fast, chances are it's because they're walking around already stressed out. If you see avoidant behaviors, I mean, I see kids all the time who escape to the computer, they escape to games, they escape or they get really chatty and they get really energized. I mean, there's the signals of stress in kids are often not as obvious. I mean, you and I might go, "Ooh, wait, my blood pressure's up. I can feel the tension in my body." Our kids don't have that same language to describe what's going on for them, and they don't have the self-awareness to notice. And so, if we treat every child's unwanted behavior as a signal, right? It's just sort of a there's a lot of great parenting experts who say, if you see an unwanted behavior, have it be a little, a light that goes off. It goes, hey, mom, hey, dad, something's going on with this kid. And if I go, something's going on with this kid, maybe they're stressed, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're frustrated, maybe there's some sort of emotion that's causing this unwanted behavior. And then the same thing in us, right? It's just sort of, we've got to pay attention to our own stress. Parenting is stressful. And if you've got a complex kid, a kid who's struggling, and you're out there trying to find the answers and figure it out and do the things, that's going to be even more stressful. And so just raising awareness to the stress that is in the family system is absolutely the first place to start. And then it's about, what do I do about it? Right. And I think that that's finding the tools. And this is a great thing. We teach entire classes on stress and trigger management. But the thing to pay attention to is, like, as a family, what is it that we do when somebody gets upset? What is it that we do when somebody's really anxious? What do we, it's like, these are normal things that happen. Everybody gets stressed. Everybody gets angry. Everybody gets triggered. I'm going to use that word. But if we're talking about it as a family, it's kind of like everybody goes to the bathroom. It's like we teach our kids how to potty train. We don't teach them how to navigate the big emotions when they happen. And wouldn't it be a gift? I just came up with this. Wow, maybe we should teach a class together. But wouldn't it be great to teach our young kids how to deal with big emotions? And great reminder, these kids aren't going to be ready to learn that at the same pace as their peers. And so we've got to pay attention. Oh, wait, I've got a first grader who's still having meltdowns at class. Maybe they weren't ready to learn how to be with their big emotions. They weren't ready to learn the coping tools, but maybe now in first grade they are. And so the teacher, the parent, the whoever can help them to go, okay, wait, I'm here with you. Let's figure out what your brain and your body needs right now to calm down. Have those moments of calm. Help them feel, wow, how does it feel? I feel really good right now. Okay, remember that. That's what we're looking for. Because a lot of times, again, it's like if we're running around at a stress level of 6 I don't know about you, but like when's the last time you really were at a 1? And do you remember what that felt like to be at a 1? I was talking to somebody this morning and we were talking about like being on a meditation retreat, and she was saying it takes like 2 days of like nothing before the adult nervous system actually gets back down to 1 or 2, right? And so again, this is why it's so important. Sorry, I'm this is one of my passions, but it's important.
Yeah, this is amazing information. Like, that is fascinating about the 2 days for the nervous system to cool down, and that makes a lot of sense because, as working parents, we take a trip, we're off for, like, a week. Let's not say we have more things on our plate, like the holidays or something like that. It does. Sometimes it feels like it takes days to just shake off the stress from work or other things. So that totally explains that. That's really fascinating to learn that. And 100% big emotions, feeling emotions, emotional regulation is so important. And, and I believe it's one of the cornerstones of, how we can help our children, especially in the toddler years and then moving forward, because a lot of times, it's like, yeah, it's like, let's learn our numbers, let's learn our ABCs. But when we get to preschool, when we get to kindergarten and then beyond, we are going to have to go through these different situations, and things might not feel fair, or things might be challenging, or we might get overwhelmed. And being able to understand emotions, and I love how you said, like, how does it feel in your body? Like that body awareness, that's also super important. So I think these are the skills that need to be talked about more. And yeah, that would be amazing to do a class or a course about talking about that and really bridging the gap, through toddlers all the way to teenagers, really, because it's something that we continually can become more self-aware about, work on. As adults, we know that we're still learning things about ourselves.
Well, and I'm sure that there are people that are out there doing great classes on this in this area already. So those of you who are listening, like put in do you have a place where people can put comments from the episode? We should have them just kind of put it comments for the resources that they found for teaching kids about big emotions and what they love. And there's so many great books out there, and I just I'm one of those people that doesn't remember the websites and the books and that sort of stuff, but I know there's some great ones out there.
Yes, yes, there are some really great books, resources out there as well.
And I don't know if you have a resources section on your website, but on our website, impactparents.com, we've got a whole section about books to even work with kids and to partner with kids, particularly if you've got kids who are complex, neuro-spicy.
Okay, so we've just talked about how we can reduce stress, more awareness on emotional regulation, but now that we understand that a little bit, let's kind of go back to the complex neurospicy. How do we know, as a parent or a caretaker, how do we identify if our child or teen is how do we know, what are the signs?
Well, so let me go through some definitions, because I think a lot of times people say, "How do I know if my teen or my child is neurodiverse?" Right? And so technically, every child is neurodiverse. All of our brains are wired differently. Neurodiversity is the idea that we all have different ways that we engage with information. We all have different ways that we engage with other humans socially. It's this sort of everyone's brain technically works differently, thrives differently, and needs to be supported differently. So that's what neurodiversity means. Neurodivergent is a terminology, and I personally don't really love that term, but it's out there, and it's a concept, and that's why we use neurospicy or complex. Just kind of it feels a little bit more friendly. Is that the idea is that with neurodivergent is that there's some range of neurodiversity that fits into a box, right? I'm going to call it, they call it neuronormative, they call it neurotypical. Again, these terms are not very friendly at all, but there's this idea that there's a bell curve and that most people fit in this area, and then there's some people that fall outside of the area. Personally, I know that like 60% of adults have some challenges of neurodiversity. And so if 60% of us are challenged, then is there really a neuronormative, or is there, do we I think we need a new system for really talking about this. And if you have a child in this category, let's just skip over the short life. These are kids who struggle with life, they struggle with learning, they struggle with social emotional issues. those sorts of things. So again, we use the term complex, and if you have a complex child, chances are you know that you have a complex child. A lot of times, parents, when their kids are diagnosed, will also get diagnosed that, oh, wait, I was just like my kid when I was in elementary school. Oh, wait, maybe that's me too. Or conversely, now that it's more common, there's a lot of when I was, so I'm older than you, but when I was a kid, almost no one was diagnosed with a lot of these challenges. It was still there and prevalent, but it was under the radar for a lot of good reasons. You can find out more about that on our podcast. But if what happens now is that a lot of the people who are becoming parents were actually diagnosed as kids. And so there's more awareness in the community. There's more, oh, wait, I'm keeping an eye out just in case my kid has a hard time in kindergarten because I remember what it was like for me in elementary school. The reality is if you've got a kid who's struggling, we want, instead of saying, how do I know if they're neurodiverse? It's really, how do I support my kid and their beautiful brain? Are they quirky? Are they creative? Are they logical? Are they all over the place? I mean, meet them where they are and help them to grow and thrive. You used the phrase strength based earlier. It's like, how often do our kids will have plenty of opportunity to see where they struggle. What our opportunity and our gift to them as parents is, how do I help them see where they're thriving? I mean, I had this group of adult parents yesterday, and we had to go through this exercise to write down, what are your strengths as an adult? And moms have a really hard time with this. This is sort of, here, I can give you 10 reasons I'm not a good mom, but to give you 5 good reasons that I am a good mom, that's hard. So, one other thing that I didn't mention, because some of you are wondering, do I get my child evaluated? Do I get them diagnosed? And you've worked in the schools, and so you have an answer to this as well. But if you are worried, find a professional. Your school can help you partner and find a professional who can evaluate your child, who can diagnose specific issues, who can help you identify learning challenges. Really, the place to often start is by partnering with the school, because they will have more connections to resources in your community. Is there anything else you'd add to that piece of it?
Yeah, yeah. So your child could be tested or go through an evaluation process. And often there could be a team of different people that could attend that, which, I don't want to give too much overwhelming information, but there could be a team of people that sit and help talk to you about your child, that have different perspectives and different skills in the school system. So it's definitely worth, if you're concerned, bringing it up and seeing what resources or what the options are for you depending on what type of school you're going to. So yeah, you said it wonderfully, and I totally agree. Like, when we write, as I was a special ed teacher, if we write an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, or if we're writing a reevaluation, which is when, every so often we reevaluate a student to see like their progress. Is there anything that's new, anything that we need to change for, to keep up with the child, to keep tabs on them. And it's very important that we don't just look at, just where they're struggling, because then we're painting a very one-sided picture of a child. We need to look at their strengths, and because those strengths can help carry them where they're struggling. So anyways, as a teacher as well, it's kind of a tangent of mine, but I think it is really important, not just, that teachers look at it that way, but also parents do as well. And you kind of just said something about kind of like how you can apply, like a principle of like a strategy or ways where, if you have a child that's neuro-spicy or a complex kiddo, how we bring that in daily family life. Like, how do we bring those like lessons or principles? And I feel like you were kind of touching upon that previously before I went off without evaluations.
Yeah, no. So how to bring it into the daily family life? I mean, I think that part of it is what we've been saying a couple of times now. It's like meeting your kids where they are and really identifying, okay, this is what I see. Observing versus interpreting, I think, is an important piece of it. So it's like this, you've got a kid what I can observe is my kid has a hard time stopping playing a game, whether it's a computer game or Legos or whatever it is, and getting to the table. right? For dinner time, right? So I can observe that that is happening, right? I'm going to create a story. Well, that means they would rather play their game. They aren't listening to me. They don't care. I don't have authority. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stories that I could create about what's going on. But the reality is, what's going on is my kid is having a hard time getting from their game to the dinner table. And if I start with that and go, okay, so what are several of the things that might be going on? Yes, you're right. Your kid might be so into their game that they are ignoring you. There's probably lots of good neurodiversity reasons that that might be happening. We use the phrase, is it naughty or is it neurological? Right. So if I look at my child's behavior and say, they don't care, they're not listening to me, how dare they? I mean, the same thing happens a lot of times. Kids, when they get big emotions, will use rude language, right? This is sort of, they will yell at their parents, they will physically, hit, or, younger kids, sometimes I remember I had one kid who was a biter. It's the sort of, they have this sort of response that is, I'm going to call it like not socially acceptable, right? But if I go, my kid's not listening, they don't care, they don't, I'm going to respond with punishments and consequences. And if you're noticing that the punishments and the consequences are not working the way that you hope that they will, chances are that what's going on here is not about bad behavior. It's about my kid is having a hard time managing their emotions. My kid is having a hard time transitioning from something fun like playing a game to something that's less fun, like sitting down at the dinner table. And so if I know, okay, what's going on is my kid is having issues with transitions, then it's like, how do I help my child transition from the game to the dinner table instead of just expecting them to be able to do it independently? And I think that that's part of this, is like, again, setting realistic expectations and watching the behavior. This is what we said a little bit ago, and saying, oh, wait, unwanted behavior is a signal, not something to be punished, right? It's this sort of, it doesn't mean that we're condoning the behavior. It just means that, okay, something's going on with this kid that's making it hard for them to follow the rules, or to do the thing that I'm asking, or to do, again, or to do the thing, honestly, that they want to be able to do. These kids want to be good kids. And if they're not, it's because they're struggling.
Yes, 100%. And I think you're kind of touching upon like some typical parenting advice, or maybe even some typical old school parenting methods where it's punishing the behavior, disciplining the behavior in a certain method or a certain way to try to get the behavior out of the child. But the problem with that is that a lot of the times the behavior are just symptoms of the struggle, as you explained, where the root cause, the real issue was the child was struggling with the transition. And so then they maybe started biting, they had outbursts, and we're saying, no, you can't have the outbursts, you can't bite. But then we're not helping support them with that transition, which was the cause. So I think, and I talk a lot about that on this podcast. So I just love to tie that in here as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's kind of two parts of that. One is what you just described, which is this sort of, we want to be able to see what's going on underneath it. What is, we call it we go. What is going on, right? It's just sort of, what's the thing that's going on under the thing, right? And that's part of it. And then I think that the other piece of it is, again, this sort of meeting them where they are. And we're not condoning bad behavior. So we want to, parents ask me all the time, am I supporting? Am I enabling? What am I doing? Right? It's just sort of why there are I mean, biting is not okay. And it's not okay. And supporting your child in changing that behavior is likely going to take time. And if you're noticing that telling them that biting's not okay, or if it's got an older kid and it's like they're hitting their brother when they're having an argument with their sibling, it's like, it's not that, if you punish them and say, hitting hurts. I remember we used to say that in our family, hitting hurts, go to your room. And it's like, well, wait, it's like what this child really needed was 10 minutes ago when they were escalating, they needed tools to go, how do I deal with this big emotion besides hitting my brother? And so, yes, hitting is not okay. And we want to send the message that hitting is not okay. But if we just send our kid to the room and then don't help them figure out how to deal with the big emotions, then we're doing this kid a disservice. It's kind of like the kid that needs glasses, and we put him in the back of the room and we say, well, you should be able to see. instead of helping them, okay, what prescription do you need? How close do you need to sit to the board? I mean, all of those sorts of things. These kids don't have the skills that it takes to self manage yet.
I love that analogy and the visual of being able to see and meeting our kids where they are with that and helping support them. That's a really good connection there. So yeah, I think you're really speaking to like we can support our children, and it's not necessarily enabling unhelpful or hurtful behaviors. It's not that we're condoning it. However, if we do want them to actually stop like hitting or biting, maybe they just didn't have the social skills yet. They didn't know how to navigate the conversation yet. And there's ways that we can give support for that. And I think that's so powerful.
Well, and to take it a step further, I think parents come to me all the time and they talk about rewards and consequences and things like that. And I always say there are two parts of a consequence. Part of a consequence is sending a message that the behavior is not okay. And part of the consequence is designed to help the child change their behavior. And if you've got a complex kid, it's important to separate those two because if I'm going to send the message, hey, that behavior is not okay, and I'm expecting that consequence is just going to help them to change their behavior. And parents do this all the time. It's like, if you can't get off, I'm going to use an older kid example, but if you can't get off your iPad, then you just can't use the iPad, right? It's this sort of, okay, so all you're teaching your kid is, you aren't helping them to learn how to transition off their iPad. You're just sending them to their room or taking away something that they like and not helping them. I'm not saying you don't take away the iPad but you don't take it away forever because ultimately what they need is help to figure out, how do I navigate technology in a healthy way? I was on the phone with a parent of a 16-year-old the other day and they were still turning off the electronics at 10 p.m. and it's taking away the phone and give it to me now and we're going to put it in a lockbox. And it's like, I'm not necessarily arguing that that's a bad strategy. It's a better strategy when your kids are young. But if you've got a 15, 17-year-old, in a year or two, they're going to be living on their own. And you ultimately want them to figure out how to have a healthy relationship with technology. Nobody's going to be there to say, it's 11 o'clock, time to put your phone in they have to figure that out themselves. So again, it's a sort of, what am I really trying to do here? If I'm trying to change a behavior, then focus on changing the behavior and don't assume that the consequence, this is the thing I didn't yet say. If you've got a neuro-spicy kid, their ability to learn from their mistakes is different than a kid who's not neuro-spicy, right? You and I do something, I don't know if you identify as neurotypical. I identify as neurotypical. It's like, I do something wrong. Something doesn't work the way that I want it to. The next time I go to do it, I'm going to go, oh yeah, wait, last time I did that, this happened to me the other day. I was boiling eggs for egg salad. And the last time I did it, I had a little experiment that didn't work in my kitchen. So I'm like, okay, I need to do something different this time. I need to set an alarm to make sure that I don't blow up the egg in my kitchen again, right? I learned from my mistakes. Kids and adults who are ADHD, who have anxiety, who have executive function challenges, don't learn from their mistakes the same way that we do as people who are not neurospicy. And it's important to remember that they need help from us to learn from what didn't work the last time.
Oh, that's fascinating. And that's really interesting to hear that, yeah, they don't learn from their mistakes the same way. And I want to touch upon that again before we finish our chat up, because I think we need to come back to that. So you were kind of just reminding me a little bit when you're talking about getting off the iPad. And this is something we are seeing in the toddler stages where kids with iPads are tantruming. Parents are giving the iPad back. We're seeing it in middle school. As a middle school teacher, I frequently saw children very fatigued all day. They're up late at night on their phones. And as a special education teacher, I am working with some neurospicy children. I'm working with a variety of students across a variety of settings and seeing the impact on the children and then how it impacts their school day, their ability to be attentive, which is already kind of challenged already. And then we're adding this whole extra layer of, are they sneaking the phone at night, like what's going on with that. So I just think this issue is such a big issue, and it's, one that really, I guess, hits home as a teacher as well, seeing students struggle with those boundaries. And then I feel like they're putting so much more on their plate already when we're already trying to navigate the day just alone, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think that what I want to pull out of what you just shared is the emotions underneath it, right? It's just sort of, as parents, we're feeling guilt, we're feeling fear, we're feeling shame, we're feeling all these things because our kids are having a hard time, right? It's this sort of, or we're feeling angry because we're seeing their behavior as disrespectful. If you've got a kid who's sneaking technology, it feels like they're pulling one over on me. And that's part of what happens. That's part of normal child development. And if you've got a child who has a hard time with transition, being able to expect them to just, okay, give me your phone and I'm going to take it away. I mean, I don't know. Imagine I don't know whether you like to watch Netflix or something, but imagine you're watching your favorite show on Netflix and you've watched it. Like, I watch movies over and over again, and it's like the best part of the movie. And it's like right about the time. And all of a sudden somebody comes in and goes, nope, we're done changing the channel. Right. And remember, if you've got a neurospicy kid, even if you told them 5 minutes ago that it was time to get off, they may not remember, or they may have been so hyper focused that they may not have heard you or seen you. There's lots of legit reasons that these kids are not paying attention. And I'm not excusing bad behavior. I want to be really clear here. But our kids need help to change their behavior, and just being able to expect. I'm guilty of this, right? 4 neurospicy humans in my family. And I was the only, I'm downstairs cooking dinner, and I yell upstairs, hey, it's time for dinner. And the only one who responds is the 3-year old, right? Because she's the least neurospicy of all of them. But she doesn't have any influence over the older ones. And then I'm mad in 10 minutes when they don't all come down for dinner. Well, they were all watching their show. They're all hyper focused. Wait, did somebody say something? Was that mom? Did she need something? Well, I don't, like, by the time they realize, like, it's gone, right? So I had to learn, sometimes I had to come upstairs and say, hey, it's time for dinner. Can I stand here with you while we figure out where to break the show and stop it and pause it so that we can all get downstairs, have dinner, and you come back and watch the end of the show, right? They needed my help to transition from this exciting thing that they were doing. Right. So that's the piece of it. Yes, you might need to do more, but we're talking about accommodating, and we're talking about not doing this forever, because if you're accommodating and you're teaching the skill at the same time when they're ready. I mean, I knew at that time my 4-year-old wasn't ready to learn how to turn off the TV, but eventually he will be. So it's like you focus on 2 things: helping them in the moment and teaching them when they're ready. Right. Instead of expecting them to be there now. And I think that that's the distinction. And one of the things that I hope everybody's heard out of this conversation today.
I love that. And I also love the collaborative process. It seems to be you're speaking of the collaborative process where we're helping and talking with and problem solving with our children. Like, hey, how are we going to do this? How will we transition and turn off your favorite video game or app or TV show?
Well, and as your kid gets older, I'm going to challenge you to stop using the word we and start using the word you. It's like, how can you do this, and how can I help you if you need me to help you, right? We talk about 4 roles of the parent: the director, the collaborator, the supporter, and the champion. And it's not linear necessarily. And it's not like magically when your kid is 16, you'll move into supporter mode. There are things, I mean, I have 20-something-year-old kids, and there are still areas like their finances where I'm more in a supporter role than a like completely hands off, even though they're living independently. But if you think about when your kid was tying their shoes, you used to just tie their shoes, and then you'd work with them and you'd tie the shoes together, and then you'd watch them tying their shoes, and you'd make sure that they were okay, and you'd be standing close by. And then the only time you have to deal with shoes is if they come to you and say, hey, mom, my shoelace is broken. Can you help me? Right? That's what the phase is, from director, collaborator, supporter to champion. And we want to be constantly thinking about, where am I right now? And this is what I see with parents, particularly parents of complex kids. Our kids need help longer than their peers. And so we stay in director mode because it's easier for me to just do it, or me to just tell them what to do, or me to just turn off the technology, than it is to have the argument or the fight or the collaboration. Because even if they say, yes, I want to turn it off in 10 minutes, they may not be able to turn it off in 10 minutes. Right. So we end up in director mode longer than we want to, longer than they want to. Then all of a sudden our kids are like, Mom, Dad, stay out of it. You're bossing me around. You're micromanaging, you're all the things. And what we really want to do is what you just described, is how do I begin to partner with my kids to help problem solve? Hey, it feels like you're having a really hard time getting up in the morning. That's another really common problem. Or you're having a really hard time turning off the electronics. I'm here to help you. I want to help you figure this out. Let's have an agreement. Maybe we have a consequence. But the thing about consequences, again, it's the sort of, we want to make the consequence the bad guy. Okay, you know that if you can't, if you're having a hard time, I'm going to help you. And if you're not partnering with me, then there's going to be a consequence. Okay, have the consequence be the bad guy. I'm really sorry that you lost your computer for tomorrow. We can try again tomorrow. Let me help you tomorrow so that you don't lose your computer again the next day. I mean, there's all these sorts of collaborative things that we can do that would really help the kids to develop the long-term healthy habits and solve the problem in the short run. That's what we're looking for, both of those things at once.
Well, this has been incredible, Diane. There are so many takeaways here and golden nuggets. I'm definitely going to re-listen to this and take some notes. I love how you have described things like with the different parenting types, the different kind of roles that we can take on. I would love to learn more about that, and I know our listeners would too. Where can our guests find you to learn more?
So our website is impactparents.com. If you're listening to this as a podcast, our podcast is called Parenting with Impact. You can, find information about our podcast, and there's always a free gift on our website at impactparents.com/podcast. But we just hope that you'll connect with us and become part of our amazing community of parents of what we call complex kids. As I mentioned earlier, we do parent training and coaching, and there's a lot of great free resources in our community as well. So.
Well, thank you so much, Diane, for raising awareness about complex kiddos and how we can best support them. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.